It's Okay Not to Be Okay, But I Promise I'm Trying, by rayrae118, Chapter 15. Once back at McGonagall Castle, Harry was finally able to tell his guardians about the event at the World Cup in detail. He was hesitant to speak about the threat, but he knew they would want to know. Both were angry and worried, but knew the only thing they could really do was warn him to be careful. Harry fidgeted. The thing is, I recognise the voice. Mr. Malfoy has a very distinctive drawl. Minerva blanched. You're certain? She asked seriously. Harry nodded. I definitely know his voice, he stated positively. Minerva sighed, collapsing into a chair. I will tell Amelia, but I'm sure you realise there isn't anything that can be done about it at this time. Harry nodded. As long as he has the minister in his pocket, Malfoy will always escape justice. Amelia can watch him. If he sets one toe out of line, she'll be there. The days to the Wizengamot meeting dwindled, and Amelia spent a great deal of time at McGonagall Castle with Augusta, Minerva and Sirius, going over their plan. Sirius and Remus continued their lessons with Harry and his friends, including the Weasley twins. Both Marauders praised their soon-to-be 3rd, 4th and 6th years on their progress. Remus told them they were all very advanced for their ages, and would notice the improvement very quickly once returned to school. In addition to the lessons, Harry made sure to spend a good deal of time just relaxing and having fun. He and his friends would spend at least an hour every day flying, and more time just talking. Harry, Ron and Hermione had been friends for 3 years already, but Neville, Susan and Ginny hadn't known them that well, apart from Ginny and Ron, of course. So they were all enjoying getting to know their new friends. The trio had expanded readily enough into a group of 6, and to Harry the addition of Neville, Susan and Ginny was both welcome and unquestionable. Even though they were new, they all fit in quite completely into the circle. Harry truly enjoyed having so many friends, and he hoped they would continue to have the same dynamic once back at Hogwarts. On August 29th, a nervous Harry watched as Minerva and Sirius both prepared to depart. Sirius looked every bit the Black Lord, thanks to the Goblin Glamour bracelet. He had been able to go out and buy some formal robes, as Minerva had only got him a few casual ones when she had taken Harry clothes shopping. Don't worry, pup, he reassured his godson. We've planned and planned. There is no way this goes wrong. But Harry didn't look at all reassured. But what if Fudge? If Fudge tries anything, he'll have to go through me. Amelia Bones appeared, ready to escort the escaped fugitive to the trial of the century. He would wait outside, disguised with his glamour bracelet, until the moment came for him to enter. He would only do so once Amelia had played his memories to cast the seed of doubt about his guilt. Oddly enough, Amelia's statement did seem to get through to Harry, and he gave his godfather a huge hug. Promise me you'll come back, he whispered, trying not to cry. Minerva was going as well, because she wanted to see what happened. Also because she was seen as a staple in the wizarding world, much like Augusta. As old as the McGonagall family was, they did not have a seat on the Wizengamot, so the best she could do was sit in the audience to offer her support. Once she was alone, Harry felt the silence closing in, as all he could think about was what Fudge might do to cover up the Ministry's mistake. He was surprised when, not 2 minutes later, the flu flared up again and Ginny stepped out. She ran over to hug Harry. Are you all right? She asked worriedly, sitting back down on the couch next to him and running a critical eye over his hunched frame. Harry shrugged. I'm just scared, he admitted, before looking up in confusion. How did you know? Ginny shrugged, looking uncertain herself. I don't know, she admitted. I just felt like you needed me. That would definitely require some thought later, but for now Harry just wanted to talk, so he and Ginny settled back and spent the rest of the morning enjoying each other's company. Harry told her about his Gringotts visit, and her jaw almost hit the floor when she realised just how rich he was, but also that he was the heir of Gryffindor. Harry looked worried when he told her, but she just shook her head and swallowing. You know this doesn't change anything, Potter, she admonished. You'll always just be Harry to me. Harry looked like Ron would have had just won the Quidditch World Cup. Ginny mentally gave herself a pat on the back, and the two continued talking as if nothing had happened. The first question was what would being an heir to the notable founder entailed. Harry shrugged. "I'm not sure," he admitted. Sharptooth didn't say anything, but that maybe he doesn't know. I might have to wait until I get back to school. Or maybe I'll find something in the Gryffindor's vault. We didn't have any time to visit a few days ago, so Sirius said we'd probably have to wait until next summer. Ginny nodded, content with what little information Harry had parted with, which was pretty much all he knew himself, and they moved on the conversation onto other topics. Anything that would get Harry's mind off the trial that even now was unfolding. Lords and ladies of the Wizengamot, I would like to call this meeting to order on the August the 29th of this year, 1994. Albus Dumbledore banged his gavel and the murmur of conversation tapered off. He looked around the room and smiled. The witness section was mostly empty as usual, though he was surprised to see his Transfiguration professor sitting there. Even if she had just come to observe the session, she should have been sitting with the rest of the audience, in section designated for observers, not witnesses. His nod to her had received a rather short supply that had him wondering if she was upset with him. The conversation with Molly had had much the same result, and he was left with fewer answers than he had come with. She seemed to be giving him a look that he only saw when she was arguing with Severus over his liberal deduction of points from Gryffindor. Now, before we begin with our agenda today, does anyone have anything they would like to add? It was customary to ask, but he didn't expect anyone to actually respond, which was why he was surprised when Amelia stood up. Chief Warlock, I have an amendment to add to the agenda. Dumbledore nodded for the head of the DMLE to continue, which she did after handing a few vials to the aide whose job it was to handle any documental evidence required for each meeting. With a glance towards the Longbottom seat, Amelia continued, Ladies and gentlemen, I have come forward today to right a grievous wrong. Almost 13 years ago, our world was in turmoil. We all did things we weren't proud of, but we needed to regain order. But that does not mean that the law can be ignored. I have just entered 4 memories into evidence. I have certified them myself as being completely true and unaltered. I ask that you watch them before I say anything else. Dumbledore had a bad feeling about this, but there was little he could do, as the entire chamber watched the replay of the first, the Potter's conversation with Sirius where they agreed to switch secret keepers, the next of Sirius finding his friends too late to help. There were tears in many of the crowd as the obvious pain the young man felt, seeing his brother in all but blood lying glassy-eyed on the floor. And finally, of Sirius's confrontation with Peter. The 4th memory was from Harry, showing his meeting with Black and previous June, up to and including Fudge's refusal to believe them, and ordering Sirius to be kissed immediately. There was a general outcry in the chamber, as some began calling for a trial, others tried to claim it was fabricated, and still others wanted to know why Amelia had these memories. Finally, Madame Longbottom stood up, drawing the attention of the room. After all, when Augusta Longbottom spoke, people listened. Wizards and witches, what is the matter with you? Many of us were seated on this body 13 years ago, and yet we all sat back and did nothing, as an innocent man was condemned to Azkaban without a trial. And now that we have the ability to act, we have the responsibility to act. Amelia smiled as the formidable woman quoted a then 13-year-old boy's words to a body of lords and ladies. First on our list should be given the young Lord Black the trial he should have received 13 years ago, followed by some very sincere grovelling to hopefully prevent him from taking his ire out on us. Fudge looked caught between a rock and a hard place. He gulped, knowing that his refusal to act several months ago would come back to bite him in the butt now. As he turned to Amelia, with so many witnesses, he did the only thing he could. I assume you can contact Mr. Black? We will certainly do our best to set up a trial as soon as he turns himself in. Amelia's smile was rather predatory. She had not missed his claim to do his best to set up a trial. No need, Minister, she informed him, shooting a look at Minerva, who immediately stood and made her way out of the room. The Transfiguration professor left for a few seconds, returning quite quickly with a healthy and very proper-looking Sirius Black. There was even more cries in the gallery at this, and a few people reached for their wands, but Amelia was quicker. She cast a shield around the man, and her voice reached all corners of the room as she spoke. Anyone who hexes Mr. Black will see that spell returned, and themselves sitting right down next to him on the floor, she warned, as Minerva led the younger man to the seat in the front. The chains immediately trapped the young lord, but he didn't look at all concerned. He was playing the part of the lord quite well, and many were surprised how different he seemed from the posters that had been appearing after his escape from prison. Amelia nodded to the auras she had tapped for this assignment. Kingsley Shacklebolt was a steady presence, always calm and collected, and very good at what he did. Nymphadora Tonks, on the other hand, she had picked more for her potential, and because of all her auras, Tonks was the only one who really deserved to be there. She deserved to know what her mother's cousin was innocent. Those two were some of the few auras she knew to be completely trustworthy. She had been very careful not to let a word of what she was planning or doing this morning get out, as she knew there would be some people in her department who would happily run to Fudge or Dumbledore and tip them off. Tonks and Shacklebolt had much the same view as she did, and their first instinct was always to do what was right, no matter what anyone else thought. Tonks gave Sirius a bright grin, trying to tell him that she believed him, which he immediately understood if the answering smile and wink were any indication. She had been very small when they had last seen one another, but he was pleased that she remembered him. Kingsley was the one to administer the Veritas serum, putting 3 drops on his tongue before stepping back. Amelia leaned forward, giving the potion a few moments to set in before she began to ask her questions. "What is your name?" "Sirius Orion Black," he said in a monotone. Amelia nodded. "Who was the Potter's secret keeper?" "Peter Pettigrew." There was some muttering, but a look from Augusta silenced them. "Why did you switch?" "We thought I would be the obvious choice. Voldemort," there were some flinches there, "would come after me, but I wouldn't be able to give him anything. And the Peter would be safe, because no one would suspect that we would use him." What happened on November the 1st, 1981? I was angry, and sad, and beyond irrational thought. I tracked Peter down to a Muggle street, where he set me up by shouting for everyone to hear how I had betrayed Lily and James. He then cut off his own finger and transformed into his rat form, escaping into the sewer. What do you mean, his rat form? He is an unregistered animagus. Peter's form is a rat. Amelia nodded to Kingsley, who immediately gave Sirius the antidote. She then turned to Dumbledore, who had no choice but to go along with it. He sighed silently, turning back to the council. "All those in favour of convicting the accused." Not even the former, or imperious, according to Fudge, Death Eaters had the guts to raise their hands. Next to Fudge, a rather stout, short, squat witch wearing a pink cardigan and a horrendous bow in her hair started to raise her hand, but stopped with a nudge and a slight shake of the head from Fudge. Dumbledore nodded. "All those in favour of clearing the accused of all charges." The vote was unanimous. There were even some clapping as the chains dropped away, and Sirius stood up, grinning. "Thank you, lords and ladies," he said graciously, his gaze focused on Dumbledore even though he spoke to the room. "I am so pleased to see justice upheld. I am sure we can discuss the proper compensation for my unlawful imprisonment at a later date." His eyes focused on Fudge at that comment. "For now, I would like to officially claim my family seat." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Unfortunately, Sirius, you will need to claim your lordship first." Sirius just raised his hand where the black head of House Ring was predominantly displayed. "The goblins have already acknowledged my lordship, so I ask again, may I officially claim my family seat?" Dumbledore nodded, defeated, and the room fell into silence, waiting, as Sirius made his way to his family seat, where he winked at Amelia to tell him he was game for whatever was coming next. He didn't sit down, which told everyone he had something else to say. His statement rocked the entire body. "My first order of business is to take over as regent for the Potter family seat, on behalf of my godson, Harry James Potter." Dumbledore was the first to make his voice heard. "I'm sorry, Sirius, but you need to have the consent of the official guardian in order to act as regent. Harry is currently being cared for by his mother's sister. Sirius glanced at Minerva, who stood up and handed the copies of the change of guardianship form she had brought with her in preparation to Amelia. Turning around to face the shocked and confused body of witches and wizards, she explained, "I took over the guardianship for Mr. Potter at the beginning of the summer, after his current ones were deemed unsuitable. Vernon Dursley is currently serving time in prison for embezzlement and theft, and his wife and son have fled the country. The guardianship forms have already been filed and made official, and have been amended to include Lord Black as a secondary guardian. As Mr. Potter's primary guardian, I have approved his appointment to Regent of the Potter family seat." Dumbledore was once more feeling flabbergasted. He had been well and truly outmanoeuvred, and by someone he thought completely loyal to him. No wonder the wards had failed. He could only hope that their actions didn't spell the end of the wizarding world. He nodded, defeated, and was thankful they had moved on to the scheduled topics to be covered. Several reporters of the Daily Prophet got their career making scoops by attending the boring, standard, run-of-the-mill Wizengamot meeting that day. Amelia waited until the meeting was over before she followed the Chief Warlock out of the courtroom. "Albus!" Dumbledore turned and almost grimaced, but hid his ire behind his customary twinkling eyes. "How may I be of service, Amelia?" he asked graciously. Amelia was not swayed by his attitude, however. She simply sat herself so that her balance was centered, ready to act should the need arise. "During my investigation into the Lord Black's incarceration, I was most intrigued to be presented by irrefutable proof that he did not, in fact, betray Lord and Lady Potter to Voldemort. You'll understand my confusion when the item that could have exonerated him was sealed shortly after the Lord and Lady and Potter's deaths. By you." Dumbledore once more had to force himself to remain calm. "I am not sure what you are speaking of, Madam Bones." There was a definite bite to his words, but Amelia was just getting started. "Had you not sealed the Potter will, Lord Black would not have been sent to Azkaban for 12 years without a trial. The bequests would have clearly shown that he was not the secret keeper. Perhaps you could explain to me why you felt it necessary to seal the will, and to completely ignore its contents while placing the young Potter heir with guardians specifically not included in the possible caregivers, when there were, at the time, 3 sets of guardians on that list who could have cared for him." Dumbledore reached out slightly with legitimacy, and somehow was not surprised when he was rebuffed immediately. Of course, the head of the DMLE would have had training. He doubted he would be able to get through, even with a full-powered attack, which would surely see him arrested. As it was, he did catch the narrowing of her eyes, and concluded she must have felt him probe her. He decided it would be not pragmatic for him to further test his luck, and simply sighed. "I did not want any unsavoury characters to try to gain access to young Harry's inheritance. As for his placement, his mother's sister seemed the most logical place for him. Mrs. Potter raised an ancient protection by sacrificing herself for her son, and inadvertently or not, made it possible for blood protection to be raised, as long as he could be in a place where his mother's family dwelled. There is nothing higher than family, after all." Amelia snorted. "You'll have to ask Lily about that, when you meet her again. Petunia Dursley hates magic, and has ever since Lily began her schooling. Anyone who knew Lily at all knew that. And as for your explanation, good luck trying to appease Minerva. She is quite put out she could have had 13 more years with the boy she already thinks of as her grandson. And good luck trying to insert yourself into young Harry's life anyway. Minerva's not the only one put out with you. You've got a lot of work to do to convince Harry to trust you again. I doubt that will ever happen after everything you have done." Amelia left him with that thought, and Dumbledore, remembering the look on his Transfiguration professor had given him during the trial, believed that she was right. Minerva was definitely angry with him. He wondered how much Harry knew, but he doubted Amelia's views were completely accurate. Harry was still just a boy, after all, and Dumbledore had been the one to offer him a place of belonging at Hogwarts. After so many years of being unworthy at his relatives, Dumbledore had offered him a chance to shine. The wrinkles with Harry would be easier to smooth over, as the headmaster knew that the boy had begun to think of him as something of a grandfather. No, Harry wasn't the one he had to work on. Minerva and Sirius, however, would be much more difficult to sway. They wouldn't understand it had all been for the greater good. He had to do what was necessary. The next morning's edition of the Daily Prophet was filled with Sirius's illegal incarceration, his trial, subsequent freedom, and 100,000 galleons the ministry was giving him for the wrongful imprisonment, and Harry's change of guardianship. Harry was just glad to have his godfather be able to see him off to Hogwarts without having to wear a glamour. End of chapter 15. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Yay! Sirius is free, and Minerva and Amelia giving Dumbledore the down low. Oh yes, girl power. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. See you in the next chapter. Bye.